Well, the member might say that. Question number 12, Jan Logie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Social Development and asks, why will she not implement a crucial recommendation of the Confidential Listening Service, that an independent body is needed to resolve historic and current complaints of abuse and neglect in state care?
The Honourable Antolli.
Mr. Speaker, MSD's Historic Claims Resolution Team is impartial and operates independently of Child, Youth and Family. It is important to note that the Ministry of Social Development did not exist in the 1950s and 60s when most of this abuse occurred. The recommendations from the final report of the Confidential Listening and Assistance Service have informed the work on the overhaul of Child, Youth and Family, and this Cabinet has agreed that the new Ministry for Vulnerable Children, Oranga Tamariki, will consider an independent complaints service that will ensure robust monitoring and accountability. But I do note that we have made good progress in resolving these historic claims. Last year, I introduced a fast-track process that gives claimants an option to have their claims resolved faster while still receiving an apology and, if they want, a financial settlement. Around 900 payments have been made to date, totalling more than $17 million.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary question, Jan Logie.
Will the Minister admit it's possible some people who were abused in state care may not trust the state to properly investigate their claims of abuse?
The Honourable Antolli.
Mr. Speaker, that is always possible. However, the Confidential Listening and Assistance Service that was set up under the previous Labor government and was in place for 7 years, heard from 1,100 people who came forward with their stories, and not only had the opportunity to tell their stories and have them taken seriously, but received various types of assistance. It is interesting that only half of those went on to make a claim, which indicates that the member is right, that some people do not want to go further with the claims process.
Supplementary, Mr.
Supplementary
Speaker.
question, Jan Logie.
Will the Minister admit it's possible some people who were told they could only have an apology if they gave up any legal claim against the state might feel the process did not have their best interests at heart?
The Honourable Antolli.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that's a hypothetical question. What I do know is that in the claims process, that is, as I say, has paid out compensation and given an apology both from the Chief Executive and in any case that's requested from myself as Minister, does everything we can to ensure that there is and the fast-track process means it's only fact-checked. There's no investigation. We only make sure that the person was in the place that they said, at the time that they said, that we make that process as simple as possible. And I've heard from complainants that what they want is recognition that they were abused, which we all find appalling, that they want the state to take responsibility for that, and they want an apology. And in some cases, they want some form of financial compensation. But we all know in this House that no money can ever make up for the abuse and the trauma that those people have suffered.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Jan Logie.
Why does she think Judge Henwood said there's not a shred of empathy or remorse in the Minister's response to this report?
The Order, the Honourable Antolli.
Well, Mr. Speaker, there is a constitutional process whereby the judiciary respect this Parliament and Parliament respects the judiciary, and I'm not going to step over that.
Where's the real Green Party?
Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary question, Jan Logie.
Considering the Minister's apparent lack of empathy or remorse, how can we trust her to truly keep the best interests of children at the heart of the Child, Youth and Family reforms?
The Honourable Antolli.
Mr. Speaker, I've always been of the opinion that you judge a person by their actions, not their words. And I think the legislation that I've brought to this House and will bring to this House will show that I am determined that the new system will keep children at the heart of it and that their voice will be heard. And it's disappointing that the Green Party and the Labour Party do not support having children having the right to have a say about their futures in the legislation that is before the House at the moment.
Order. And that concludes question. I'll answer.